Good evening from New York. I'm Lawrence O'Donnell. If you were watching this program closely last week and have an extraordinary memory, you already know that my answer to tonight's multiple choice is C. In Washington, there is no such thing as fighting. I said that in an interview with David Axelrod while we were discussing complaints about President Obama from his supporters. Now, this might be just semantic confusion over the verb to fight, but in my years working in the Senate, I never saw a politician fight. I heard most of them lie during their campaigns and promise they were going to fight. In presidential campaigns, the press is always complicit in these lies, pretending they are covering a campaign for king instead of a campaign to be the chief administrator of a co-equal branch of government that includes another branch populated by 535 independently and democratically elected members. Instead of fighting, elected officials in Washington simply ask other politicians to support their positions. And those other politicians consider those requests based exclusively on their own political self-interest. Candidate George W. Bush promised to fight for tax cuts, which turned out to be no fight at all, since Republicans and Democrats were eager to vote for tax cuts. In President Bush's 2004 re-election campaign, he promised to fight for Social Security reform. And with his party in power in Congress, he very politely asked the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee to consider the matter. They refused. They never brought it to a vote in their committees or allowed it to be considered on the floor of the House or the Senate because it was not in their political interest to do so. Presidents are not legislative leaders. They are legislative beggars. That is the design of the government. The Congress never gives presidents everything they ask for, and its members are virtually immune to presidential pressure. Presidents always discover that the politics of governing are far more complex and contradictory to the politics of campaigning. And they always have trouble explaining that to the people they lied to in the campaign. Joining me now are Obama critics Jane Hampshire, the founder of FireDogLake.com, and Adam Green, co-founder of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, and intrepid Obama defender Ed Rendell, the governor of Pennsylvania. Now, I just want to begin by saying in political discussions and in political efforts, the biggest problems, and I think, Governor, I wonder if you agree with me on this, the biggest problems you confront are always with your friends. Because your political enemies, the other side, the other party, they never disappoint you because you never expect anything from them. But it's trying to negotiate agreements with your friends within your own party about how to go forward that are incredibly difficult. And Jane, I want to start with you. This is the president you supported, Barack Obama, and you have been critical of him on health care and other policy issues as his presidency has worn on. But I just want to establish at the outset, you do favor and support the Democrats in this congressional midterm election, don't you?
Well, absolutely. And I don't actually think that the characterization of, critics and defenders is accurate in this situation because we all really want the same thing. We want Democrats to turn out this fall, and we want the campaigns to be a success. And as someone who, every day tries to get people motivated to donate money, we raised $40,000 for Russ Feingold last week. We're operating phone banks into California, Arizona, South Dakota, and Oregon over marijuana measures, trying to get people out to vote. It gets difficult when they come back to you and they say, look, the president could be signing a way don't ask, don't tell. He could change it so that don't ask, don't tell discharges weren't happening right now himself. He doesn't need anybody else, no Congress, nobody else involved to do this, and he's not. Why isn't he doing that? And you have to answer that when people ask you these things, and that's why you say, look, President Obama, make it easier. Please do these things.
Adam Green, you work in the Senate. You know what I'm talking about in terms of the degree of difficulty in getting individual senators to go your way. How do you see the multiple choice that I outlined at the beginning of the show, and which one would you pick?
Well, I would definitely say that some combination of A and B. I think that you can do what's right and also achieve it. But I agree with you if your point is you wouldn't pick a fight intentionally to lose, but I would also agree with the point that you never pick a fight that you only can win. If so, you're really not fighting hard enough. Just to give you a little bit of my experience, I was in the deep red state of South Dakota in 2002, working as press secretary for Senator Tim Johnson. And that was a year when Democrats were under siege and 9/11 had just happened. And I saw with my own eyes President Bush used the bully pulpit of his office. He flew into South Dakota and demanded that Tim Johnson not vote to unionize the new Department of Homeland Security, and said that if he voted to unionize it, he was essentially helping the terrorists. Well, I don't buy that line of attack, but a lot of senators caved to that. And that is essentially how you apply pressure. It has to be willing to step on toes, willing to command public attention, and force senators to go along with you. That's what he did, and that's what President Obama needs to do.
Well, the way I think we have a spot of agreement there, Adam. What I would say that example is an example of a president making it in the senator's political interest to vote this way by going into his state and putting that pressure on. So I think we're looking at the same thing, and I think we're probably describing it in almost the same terms. Governor Rendell, what do you have to say to Obama critics? And look, that you can be a supporter and a critic. I mean, the thing I hate in politics are robots, you know, who just will go along with anything and any kind of flip-flop or broken promise that a politician does. You can vote for a politician, criticize them when they break a promise, and then vote for them again for re-election because that one's better than the alternative. But what do you have to say to the uninspired Democratic base right now that we're in polls? It indicates they aren't showing the same enthusiasm about even showing up at the polls as they did in 2008.
Well, point number one, this isn't about President Obama. I mean, he's out there campaigning, and I think he's lately done a pretty good job of it. But this isn't about him. It's about whether the Democratic Party, not perfect, but certainly bent on trying to preserve progressive theories in government and progressive practices, is going to be in charge of the Congress or the Republican Party. And it's not the Republican Party of old. This is a scary Republican Party. So we ought to get over it. And if we've got some issues with President Obama, save them for another day. This is about the Congress of the United States turning control, as you said, Lawrence, of that co-equal branch over to a bunch of people who are more and more increasingly influenced by what I call the wacko wing of the Republican Party. And if that's not enough to motivate Democrats, if that's not enough to scare them, to scare the pajamas out of them, it ought to be, because this can be an enormously destructive election for the United States.
Jane, I think the most intelligent, articulate, and effective criticism of the Democrats' health care legislation and the Obama health care legislation was offered by you and by Dennis Kucinich. It came from the left, and I'm glad you entered those objections into the record, because I think a lot of them are going to prove true as the history of this plays out. But does there come a time in the politics of all of this where the left should hold their fire at some point in the calendar and start to say, we now have to unify around the Democrats to keep them in power, you know, as Dennis Kucinich does. You don't hear Dennis Kucinich now launching any of the criticisms that he did in the first year of the Obama administration, and any of those health care criticisms that he was so articulate about.
Well, what happens in an election period is that you go to your representatives and you ask them, what do you intend to do after you're elected next time? And that's what you base your vote on. And that's the time when elected officials hope to be newly elected officials, and they are subject to pressure from the voters. And on December 1st, the Cat Food Commission or the Deficit Commission is going to come back with a series of recommendations. And the members have said that they intend to come back and cut Social Security benefits in order to balance, in order to cut the deficit. And so this actually is the last time before the election that people can go to their representatives and say, hey, do you intend to vote for this? This is the democratic process. This is how we do it. That's why we hold elections.
Governor, Adam Green, as you might know, was part of the coalition that went down to Arkansas to help run and fund and support a primary challenge to Senator Blanche Lincoln. Now, that challenge came up short. I think it did redefine Democratic Party politics in Arkansas by showing that there is a challenge that can be mounted on the left of a Democratic elected official in Arkansas. I've never seen that kind of challenge mounted before. But what would you say to Adam Green about the wisdom of that challenge? Do you think that weakened Blanche Lincoln going into this election in November? Do you think it weakened the Democratic Party? Do you think that the left should have tactically held their fire to try to do everything they could to preserve that Democratic seat?
No, I think primary challenges are fair game. And if the left or the moderate wing of our party wants to challenge somebody, I think it's fair game, and in many ways makes the winner a little bit stronger. You know, I know when Bob Casey and I squared off in 2002, people said, oh, this is going to wreck our chances. Well, I came out of that election much stronger, much better known, and the Republican never had a chance looking back. So I think that's fair and appropriate. But that's all over, Lawrence. This is 4 weeks to go. 4 weeks to maybe having a Republican Congress, which with this Republican Party is a very frightening prospect. We need to, all of us, get over it, get out to vote. Even if it's not a wildly enthusiastic vote, there's an old maxim in politics, a tepid vote counts exactly the same as a wildly enthusiastic vote. Let's keep the Congress.
Adam, Rahm Emanuel has been a big target of yours in the White House as the compromiser, the guy who makes the deals with the pharmaceutical companies, the health insurance companies, and kind of sells away the ideals of Obama legislative efforts. You've already announced, even before he formally announced his candidacy for mayor, you've already announced your opposition to his candidacy, kind of chasing him out the door of the White House. Is this just vengeance now? I mean, are you opposing his candidacy in Chicago because you have a better candidate that you want to back, or you just want to stop this guy who did things that you don't like in the White House?
Well, first of all, Rahm Emanuel stepping down from the White House is good news for anybody who voted for change in 2008. He's been one of the leading voices arguing to cave before the fight in the White House. And our point was we now have him where we want him. Voters deserve a chance to actually weigh in and reject him publicly. But I actually want to say one thing to Governor Rendell, because I want to assure him that progressives aren't only carping here from the sidelines. We're actually helping to get out the vote this year. You know, just this past weekend, people from across the country went to our website, boldprogressives.org, and made over 10,000 phone calls to Kentucky voters to help Jack Conway defeat Tea Party Republican Rand Paul in that Senate race. Also, we raised over $100,000 from over 10,000 people for Ann McLean Custer, a great progressive running in a key competitive election up in New Hampshire. So we're doing our part, Governor. But when you say get over it, you know, you don't have to convince people like me or like Jane to get over it. You know, we're going to vote. But for the 20-year-old kid out there who voted for the first time in 2008 and had his hopes really high and saw, you know, this White House not use the bully pulpit of their office to pressure people like Olympia Snowe, whose constituents overwhelmingly wanted things like a public option, but instead cut backroom deals, when that person is thinking about not voting, get over it isn't what they need to see. What they need to see is a president acknowledging pretty much that in the future, the correct choice is to actually fight. The correct choice is to actually hold Republicans accountable. And if these voters come back out to the polls and trust Democrats again with their vote, they will have a fighting Democratic Party. That's what will inspire those people.
Well, if I can say, Lawrence, to Adam, look, that's a view, and I respect the view, but I don't think it realistically takes into account what it is to get stuff passed. You know, you can say all you want about the health care bill, and I was for a public option. No ifs, ands, and buts. Or at least making Medicaid down to 55 years of age. I wanted either one of those things. But in Pennsylvania this past month, we've seen 26-year-olds covered for the first time on their parents' health insurance. We've seen seniors get a check to cover the donut hole. We've seen 25-year-olds and under no longer eligible to be denied coverage because of pre-existing illness. We've seen small business get a tax credit. We've seen so many terrific things happen from the health care bill, things that should have happened in this country years ago. Is the health care bill perfect? No. But we got past something that's revolutionizing what insurance companies can or cannot do to our people. That's something I think we can be proud of. It wasn't perfect. I would have been for a public option, but a lot of great things have happened on that. There's a high-risk pool in Pennsylvania that's going to have 4,000 people who might die if they don't get care. That's something to be proud of.
Governor, you're on the short list of names being spread around about possibly being the next White House Chief of Staff. Would you take that demotion from governorship to White House Chief of Staff?
Well, Lawrence, my term as governor ends in about 3.5 months, and it's the only job in the federal government I'd consider, but I don't think my makeup is a great Chief of Staff makeup. I said to Al Hunt over the weekend, I said, if I were president, Ed Rendell was one of the last people I'd want to be Chief of Staff.
Adam, very quickly, Ed Rendell for White House Chief of Staff. You okay with that? You want to think about it. Okay, take your time. We're going to leave it right there. Governor Ed Rendell of Pennsylvania, Jane Hampshire of Fire Dog Lake, and Adam Green of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. I want to thank you all for this family discussion here tonight. I really appreciate it.
4 weeks to go, guys.
Okay.
Yep.